Welcome to the Rocks Back Pages podcast, in which we discuss all that's new in the world's largest archive of music journalism. I'm Barney Hoskins, and I'm in Hammersmith with my colleagues Mark Pringle.
Hi, Barney.
And Jasper Morrison-Bowie.
Hello, Barney.
And joining us for this episode are two legends of music journalism, Edwin Pouncey.
Oh, hello, Barney.
And Sandy Robertson.
Hi.
Both wrote for Sounds magazine, and both have gone on to great things. Edwin, particularly in his guise as comics artist Savage Pencil. Sandy is the author of several fine tomes, one of my favourites bearing the title Meatloaf, Jim Steinman and the Phenomenology of Excess. Which I think must be one of the great titles for a music book.
Jim Steinman loved it.
Yes, he would have done. But did he have to go and look up what phenomenology meant?
No, I think he knew.
You think he knew? Okay, cool. Guys, you've known each other for several decades, and you also share a deep interest in rock's relationship with the occult. So we'd like to go over to the dark side with you, at least for an hour. But shall we start with how you both came to write for Sounds in the first place? Sandy, what's your story?
Yeah, I had a very glamorous older cousin called Linda Gamble, who is now a big-time publicist for films. But she quit her law degree and then went to work at the early days of Virgin Records. And She told me there was this thing called the music press. And from then on, I wanted to be a rock journalist, you know. I met another weirdo who lived in the same town, Alex Ferguson, and we formed a bedroom band called The Nobodies. And I sent an electronic tape I did to Eno, which he wisely rejected. And I realised I wasn't going to be a musician. So we moved to London together, and he ended up in Mark Perry's band ATV, and then writing songs. He was in Psychic TV with Genesis P-Orridge, and he produced Orange Juice and things like that. And I did my little white stuff, a little Patti Smith fanzine. And Vivian Goldman at Sounds bought a copy of it and actually phoned me up and said, "You can actually write." And she gave me a couple of little things to see if I would screw them up or do what she wanted, and she was happy with them. And a couple of weeks later she said, "Do you want to do Mick Jagger?" And just went from there.
Was it interview Mick Jagger?
Yeah.
Literally a couple of weeks later,
yeah.
you like to interview Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
That's what's about throwing in the deep end.
Yeah, it didn't make me popular with the rest of the staff because they all wanted that job.
Sure, of course. Edwin, was Sandy already at Sounds when you began?
Oh, yes, he was, yes.
Because it was sort of 1977 broadly that you
early
both came into the paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because previously I was just doing the comic strip, you know, at home and stuff like that. Well, I'd finished my degree at the Royal College of Art. I'd come back from America, and I was still doing the comic strip. The reason was the reason I got the comic strip gig as well was again through our friend Vivian Goldman, who I met in Rough Trade, and we both shared a kind of interest in reggae and dub and stuff. And she sort of put me on the road to what was worth listening to and what wasn't. She said to me, one day, "Oh, Sounds needs a cartoonist. Can you come in and show the editor, Alan Lewis, some of your work?" I said, "Okay." So I sort of went home and drew all night in my sketchbook all these ideas for a possible cartoon strip. And I went in there, and Alan Lewis looked at it and just started ripping the pages out of the sketchbook and gluing them onto a sheet, and then stuck them in that was it. He sort of just made up the page. I went, okay. And he said, can you do some more next week? And I said, yeah, sure. So that was it, really, and I was on the way. So I was sort of doing the cartoon strip for a while, and then when I come back from America, I needed a job, and a job of sort of layout artist came up at Sounds. So I sort of applied and amazingly got it. And it wasn't just being a layout artist. I found you had to actually write for the magazine. You had to do a number of things, sub-edit, all sorts of things you had to. So it was like a job within a job within a job. So you kind of really learnt on your feet, really, A bit like Sandy did, but he'd been shoved in front of Mick Jagger. But
that's because I don't remember that at NME, for example. I mean, you weren't expected to do that range of tasks.
No. Oh, we were.
You were.
Yeah.
I could sub-edit.
You sub-edited as well.
Yeah,
though.
but I couldn't do layouts, really.
No.
You know. But I knew, back in the day when they had printers marks, I mean, I knew how to do all that.
Yeah.
You had to learn, how to, really correct the copy using the marks, you know what I mean, that the printers could understand so that they could make the fonts right and everything like that. And
Briefly, when you were at Sounds, how did you feel about, the main rivals to Sounds, Enemy and Melody Maker? What did you feel Sounds' identity was relative to those two other weeklies?
Well, I love Nick Kent and Max Bell, especially. But Sounds, I've heard Enemy writers say this, that they envied the freedom that we had at Sounds. You could go to Alan Lewis and say, I want to do Throbbing Gristle, which nobody cared about. And he'd say, oh, all right,
Yes.
Whereas they said they were more constricted.
Yes.
But Enemy is a great magazine. I thought all the infighting and sniping that went on in columns was ridiculous. We all did it, but I used to say, look, can we not stop this?
Yeah. I mean, would you broadly agree with that, Edwin? Because you certainly were able to write about quite a lot of different things. You weren't pigeonholed into one category.
You weren't sort of entrapped by the music industry as much as the other magazines seemed to be. You were sort of, like Sandy said, Alan Lewis was a fantastic editor because he would just... He'd see inside you, he'd see something inside you, you know what I mean, what you really wanted to do. And he'd just say, go for it. He'd go with the flow, if you know what I mean. And he always used to sort of work because you respected him a lot because he'd given you that chance, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it produced good work, interesting work.
Yeah.
John Savage started his career, sort of career at Sounds, and he was writing about... Well, he wrote that very interesting stuff. I think he introduced us to the Residents, you know what I mean, things like that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and Jane Suck, of course, was
Suck,
sort of Sounds as Julie Birchall.
One thing is that kind of historically, Sounds is remembered just for one tiny element, two tiny elements of what happened. And it's not that magazine at all. It's not a heavy metal magazine, even though the new wave of heavy metal, Jeff Barton, was important in that respect. And it wasn't an Oi magazine, Gary Bushell, but that tends to be the way people perceive it historically, which is garbage. My only objection to Sounds is it's so badly printed. I mean, it's really hard to scan pieces sometimes and OCR them because it's just a smear.
Yeah.
My scrapbooks fell apart. I just chucked them. They were just crumbling.
Crumbling tomes.
Yeah.
Mr. Crowley, what went on in your head?
So, can we talk just a little bit about your interest in the occult? Because it's such a fascinating strand of kind of rock history, and I don't know where it began individually. I think you said it began in childhood for you, and I don't know if that's applies to you as well, Edwin. Were you interested in or aware of things like people like Aleister Crowley when you were young?
When I was a child? No, I suppose mine came through reading just like horror stories and Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine at my dad's shop, you know what I mean, and things like that. And mine came through a more of a sort of, a more sort of commercial kind of way than a deep, occult kind of knowledge type way.
Yeah.
But I guess that's... didn't we both do that? We saw a magazine that said Castle of Frankenstein on it, and we just grabbed at it. A horror comic, let's have that instead of Superman. That bore. Let's do that. So
yes.
you were sort of introduced to it in a different sort of way, really.
Yes.
How do you think that? What do you think marks the transition from horror comics to occult? Religion, kind of, that different. There is a difference there, right?
Could I just say curiosity? Just like you want to kind of learn more.
Mm-hmm.
You want it's like you listen to a band or something like that, and you think, well, what's at the roots of what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And so you search them out and you find it,
Yeah.
you know, and then that opens doors, you know, doors start opening.
Sure.
So I guess it's the same with that, really,
Yeah.
you know.
I found a paperback, they'd reissued it with a title, Aleister Crowley, the Black Magician, and it was by filmmaker Donald Campbell's father, who was a friend of Crowley, and it was a sympathetic biography. You know, it didn't completely damn him, you know. And I thought, this is really interesting. My dad was going, oh my God, no. The wickedest
Put
man.
that down.
The evilest man in the world.
We all sort of grew up with a slightly, almost like the Dennis Weekly books card.
Precisely. I was just about to say that, actually, yeah. And he had a library of the occult,
Right.
which came out in Arrow paperbacks. Do you remember this, Sandy?
Yeah,
Dennis
I've got them
Wheatley's
all.
Arrow of the Yeah, you've probably got them all.
45 volumes or whatever.
45 volumes. Excellent, right, you know.
Yeah.
Quite hard to find.
But those were kind of like a way of, you know, you could buy those at the station.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You
Yeah,
could just
yeah.
pick those up, like either classic occult novels or things about the supernatural and stuff.
Next to
But next to sort of like the Malleus Maleficarum, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Which
But
is
also
like-
next to Trouble for Skinhead and like the other sort of paperbacks
that
that
kind
were
of thing,
around
yeah,
at the
yeah.
time.
Yeah. So, Sandy, you one of the pieces we're going to feature on the homepage is the 1982 piece that you wrote about Crowley. I think it's just called Mr. Crowley. I don't know whether Ozzy's song was already out at that point, Mr. Crowley. It must have been.
I think it
guess.
was. I
Yeah,
think
hence
I
the
didn't
title.
pick the title, so it was just put by the.
Well, it's a very interesting guide to why Crowley has meant so much to people like Jimmy Page. So let's just talk about kind of Jimmy, for example, and Jimmy's relationship historically with Crowley and reading Crowley, but also, you know, Kenneth Anger, who was also a sort of disciple of Aleister Crowley. So, can you, both of you, sort of explain the appeal? Why would someone like Jimmy Page become so fascinated by this sort of dark side?
I think people like Jimmy Page were the first people, since the first modern people who had the financial wherewithal to actually live the way Crowley did when he was a young man with a big inheritance. They could actually buy his old house, or they could go to Sicily and look at the ruins of his abbey and so forth. But why were they interested? It's the idea of freedom. I mean, do what thou wilt. People always think it just means do anything you like. Doesn't matter. But Crowley always said what it means is if you fulfil the will, your true will, that God wants you to do, by its very nature, if it's what God wants you to do, it won't interfere with anyone else's will. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he said.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess Jimmy Page's will probably did interfere with
Oh,
other
yeah.
people's
I'm sure
will.
I think so.
But there was, part of the allure of Zeppelin was there was a kind of darkness that I don't know if you're a Zeppelin fan, possibly not, but
I have
what would
all
you
the
say
records.
about? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Do you think that's? When I was a kid and I was sort of still basically listening to T-Rex, and I sort of discovered Led Zeppelin because a schoolmate had a big brother and he brought all the Zeppelin albums in, and I think what I was responding to was a kind of something quite sinister and dark and menacing and obviously very powerful. And I think it's still, you listen to something like In the Light and it's quite hard not to sort of feel sort of shivers on your skin. Do you respond, Edwin, in that way to the sort of dark side of Zeppelin?
I find the music still to this day quite exciting, really. You know, I kind of get that frisson of excitement through listening to something like, well, one track, particularly The Ocean of Houses of the Holy. You know, that's incredible, that
Fantastic.
track. Amazing.
Yeah.
You know, so I do get that. Get that. And I think what Sandy's just said, you know, about him being able to afford all this luxury and everything and live the way that Crowley would have lived is a really interesting idea for a rock star to do, in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and the awareness that one had that he had bought Crowley's Boleskine, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah,
I think?
Boleskine.
To buy Boleskine House. I mean, it's
it was quite a
it's like a
statement.
collector's dream, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I've got all the books, I've got all the, what can I get now? His house.
Didn't it burn down?
I'll just ring it up. Yeah,
Later it did.
It's a couple of times, I believe. Nobody's proved it, but I think it's just either locals that don't like the rep or sort of deluded Christians who just want to destroy it. It's somebody's house, man. I think that's terrible. Somebody lives there.
Yes.
But there's that story about Kenneth Anger and Jimmy Page sort of having a kind of an almost magical battle at an auction room when all those insanely rare Crowley books turned up, wasn't it? And they were sort of like...
Bid what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Bid what thou wilt shall be the end of my bank balance type thing. But it was almost like a sort of...
I've put a curse on Jimmy Page.
A sorcerer's kind of battle, wasn't it, in a way? What's that film with Boris Karloff in it, with Roger Corman did?
The Raven.
The Raven,
I watched that the other night, yeah.
It's great.
Talking of films, of course, Anger's films are extraordinary. Invocation of My Demon Brother. I don't know what the status of that film is, or more particularly Lucifer Rising, of course. I mean, which featured Marianne Faithfull and others.
They look really crude these days.
But that, I think, is part of their kind of appeal. When you see something like Scorpio Rising, it is like a kind of home movie. Yeah. But that's part of its, I don't know.
Might have something to do with the budget.
Yeah, I was going to say, zero budget.
Hollywood, funnily enough, was not giving
budget.
Kenneth Anger
And of course,
money.
and that's the link to Manson, because Beausoleil, W. Beausoleil, who's still in jail, I believe.
Yeah.
Still in jail.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in your occult primer, this fantastic piece you wrote for The Wire in 2016, you describe how Anger went back to Bobby Beausoleil, who was the original guy he wanted to soundtrack Lucifer Rising, and he went back to Beausoleil in prison and asked him to start work on that again, and Beausoleil put together a kind of prison orchestra, didn't he?
Yes.
I mean, can you tell us a little bit about Beausoleil and Anger's relation, and just all of that, and Manson? It's quite obviously macabre area of popular culture.
Well, didn't Beausoleil steal the tapes and bury them in the desert or something?
Yeah, I think he
like that?
denies that, but that's what Anger seemed to have thought happened, yeah.
Yes. And then I think Page was asked to rewrite the soundtrack and everything. That didn't work out, and so he went back to Beausoleil, and he did
Put together a sort of magical orchestra.
which sort of seemed to be... There's so many different... there's quite a few versions of it, that keep coming out, sort of. So he was obviously making revisions all the time to it. It was like his big epic work or something.
Yeah, I think that's probably
Lucifer
right.
Rising, because this huge box set came out with everything in it, and or they thought everything in it, and then another box set appears with something else in it that you haven't heard, as is the way of record production today.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's it might even be, for all I know, an ongoing project with him. He might be right now sitting in his cell writing another draft for Anger,
Yeah.
But Anger's an interesting guy, very interesting person.
I think he's absolutely fascinating. We've got a couple of interviews on RBP with Kenneth Anger. Mick Brown did a long interview with him, and kind of creepy but fascinating guy.
Anger actually objected to my Crowley book. There was things in it that he didn't like, and the American edition got changed because they didn't want to fight.
Well, he objected to the idea that the Stones... I mean, there's a key track in the context of the discussion. It's obviously Sympathy for the Devil, isn't it? And I think you say, that might have been written about Kenneth Anger, and he was not happy about that.
Yeah, he wasn't happy about that.
Yeah.
And there was letters... flyers, like letters a guy wrote to me who had issued Jimmy Page's soundtrack as a bootleg, and I was told that Anger got some money from the guy, but when Jimmy Page sued the bloke, Anger was like, I had nothing to do with it. Oh, you horrible man, So I don't know what the truth is, but he certainly didn't want it in the book.
If we go like beyond Zeppelin, if you like, beyond the Stones and those famous names, into the sort of terrain, Edwin, of your occult primer, what are the kind of more obscure names that you would cite that are interesting? You know, is it like, let's talk about Black Widow rather than Black Sabbath? Who would you nominate as kind of the more interesting occult rock artists? And what about someone like Graham Bond and his Holy Magic?
Yeah, I mean, another Crowley disciple, really. You know, Graham Bond, who unfortunately killed himself, didn't he, on the
Finsbury Park,
on the Finsbury Park
Yeah.
Underground line? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Graham Bond came out of jazz. You know, he was playing with Ginger Baker and
Jack Bruce.
Jack Bruce
Yeah.
and everything. You know, the seeds of
organisation.
cream sort of thing, in a way. And how he turned that way, I've got no idea, really. I suppose it's in that book, which I haven't read, unfortunately. But
Me neither.
There's some sort of theory that he was suffering from maybe schizophrenia, and it may have been sort of simply related to mental health stuff. You know,
Yeah.
so what would have been an interest in 1964 became poison to him
Yes.
later in life.
Yes. I mean, there's also Bowie, of course, and I think you touch on the song Quicksand from Hunky Dory.
I'm closer to the golden dawn, immersed in Crowley's uniform of imagery.
There's also a piece we're going to add in the main feature, which is Ian MacDonald writing about Bowie's slightly dilettantish occultism. But I'd forgotten that Aleister Crowley actually gets a name check in the song Quicksand, as does Heinrich Himmler, which is even more
Nice.
disturbing. Nice. Yeah, that whole sort of idea of occultism and the Golden Dawn, the Golden Ring. I don't know. It's all kind of weird.
I mean,
Really.
the swastika itself is a symbol that Crowley, you know,
It's an occult symbol.
It's a Sanskrit.
It's a Sanskrit symbol, right?
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
something that he was using. And didn't he also write propaganda for Germany in the First World War and stuff?
Because
So
it's
it's-
Crowley,
certainly
mean.
did.
yeah.
His claim was that he did that in a kind of reductio
Parodic
ad
sort of,
absurdum thing
yeah.
to make them look really stupid. And there is, and in the Second World War, there is a lot of evidence that he secretly did work for the British government. It's playing both sides.
It's all. I mean, there's a kind of interesting contrast. I mean, conflict almost between what you were saying earlier is a lot of it is about freedom and expressing various things, and then when you get towards the sort of Manson stuff, a lot of it becomes about using that to control others. So there's a kind of conflict there for me.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, you know, there's a seriousness here. On the other hand, the black bands, the Sabbaths, the Black Widows, were more close to Dennis Wheatley, I'd say. It was a sort of British provincial paperback book sort of notion.
Quite
of
very Midlands.
Midlands.
The Black Country.
There it is. That's it. The Black Country. Why do you think it's
But
called?
Black Widow were kind of linked to Alex Sanders, the god of the witches,
Yeah.
who was notoriously splashed all over the tabloids, you know, for doing these secret rites everywhere and
With naked women.
naked women
yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
Sort of, kind of filtering into pornography in a way, do you know what I mean, sort of thing. That was everywhere, and that was very British.
Yeah.
And when you hear that record, you know, Come to the Sabbath,
Yeah.
it just sounds so British, doesn't it? Don't you think? It just sounds so sort of staid almost, and you know,
Yeah, it's not exactly Norwegian black metal.
No,
is
it's Hammer horror, sort of, you know.
Exactly.
but they did practice a ritual
They actually
on
did, yeah,
stage
yeah.
that
Yes.
was that with I think it was supervised by Alex Sanders as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Help me in my search for knowledge. I must learn the secret art. Who dares to help me raise the one whose very name soothes my heart?
I mean, if we bring the story up to present day via kind of black metal and the sort of atrocious things that happened, you know, in the name of black metal, where would you say, you know, music's relationship with the
burning
occult
churches,
stands
you mean?
now?
Yeah.
And
And killing each other.
And killing it.
Murder,
Well, you're talking about
murder.
the second Norwegian wave of black
Yeah,
metal.
the second Norwegian wage, which is I mean,
Post-Bathory.
did you guys did you follow that while
Of
it
course.
was happening? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I read about it, yeah.
Well, it was all over Kerrang, wasn't it? You know, Kerrang,
was.
Kerrang did a big thing on it.
Well,
you know.
we've got this guy, Torreoren, who just wrote 4 pieces for Kerrang, who's Norwegian, and he sort of did these kind of...
They're really in-depth,
quite interesting
reports on what
reports
happened.
on that stuff.
But I mean, as a sort of non kind of black metal aficionado, there was that feeling, certainly for someone like me, that it's like has heavy metal gone a bit too far now? I don't know what your thoughts were on the occult aspects of all that.
Let's take Mayhem, for instance, who
Yes.
I believe are still the best in the business in a way. You know, I mean, for me, they were like the beginning of that particular period of black metal that I got interested in.
Yeah.
And the first record, you know, was an EP sort of thing, and it was sort of called Death Crush. And it was more like a punk rock record in a way, you know, punk rock with shades of Venom on top of it, you know what I mean, that sort of thing.
The band Venom.
Venom, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Great band.
So that was that. And then all of a sudden, bang, they went into heavy-duty satanic worship with the next record.
Yeah.
We went.
Yes. In your primer, you mention this French power trio.
Alec Tadolo.
Yes,
I really
and their
don't know what's
album.
happened to them anymore,
Right.
but at the time of writing, they were kind of like one of my favourite black metal related type acts, if you so.
Yeah.
But astonishingly, you went there and it was just like music that was very trance-inducing, you know, a bit like heavier Hawkwind or something like that, but also you sort of listen between the cracks and weird things like surf instrumental would appear, you know what I mean, and things like that. But like
intrigued.
heavily amplified, but really odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And occult rock, if you can get hold of a copy, it's a wonderful record.
That was the name of their was it single or was it double album?
Double album, yes,
album,
yes.
Occult Rock.
Maybe a blind alley, but did any musicians become associated with that weird Scientology offshoot, the Process?
Yes. Sabbath Assembly.
Right.
And they were... David Nuss from the No Neck Blues Band started that. No Neck Blues Band are a sort of an improvisational group who sort of mixed all sorts of music together. Mm-hmm. Free jazz, folk, rock, all sorts of things. They put a record out on John Fay's Revenant label.
Right, sounds right up my street.
Produced by Jerry Yester, would you believe?
Oh,
really?
It's a really great record as well.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so out of the ashes of that came Sabbath Assembly, and they returned to the actual song texts and music, you know, written scores of what the Process Church used to sing at their meetings, and re-recorded them all.
Yeah, extraordinary. I've got one copy of the magazine, which is
called the Process.
The Process.
Yeah,
It's pretty riveting stuff.
it? Yeah.
But they interview. I think Jimmy Savile's interviewed.
Yes,
Extraordinary.
there's a
Bloody
book. There's a nice book which has all the magazines in colour.
Not all of them. Three of the issues.
Oh, yes,
the
so
first two
yeah.
are missing.
Yeah,
Can we briefly, Sandy, talk about Throbbing Gristle and Genesis Peerage?
yeah.
And how they sort of fit into this? Because you wrote about them pretty early. I mean, you mentioned it. You went to Alan Lewis to kind of write about this band, Throbbing Gristle.
I was at the Roxy, that little club that existed briefly. Genesis Peerage was there, and someone pointed him out to me. And I remember that I had a cutting from Melody Maker from a couple of years ago, a little strip, and you know, and I kept it because they sounded so unusual, you know. And I just went up to him and said, "Oh, you're Genesis Peerage, blah blah. You know, would you do an interview?" And he goes, "Oh, people always say that, but they never come back to me, you know, because their editors won't allow it." And I said, "Well, give me your phone number." And Alan Lewis went, "Yeah, okay." And I just phoned him the next day. I didn't listen to their music riotously all the time at home, you know, but I loved going to their gigs, which only lasted 1 hour. They had a machine that would cut the sound after an hour, and then you would get ABBA or something.
I love that their first
Even
album
more
was
horrible.
I think it was called 20 jazz funk great, wasn't it? Was that? Have I got that correct?
That's one of their
title?
albums.
That's one of
It
them.
wasn't the
That's not
first album.
No.
Okay,
That was
that's the
called
first one I was aware of.
First
I
one was
remember
called
thinking,
Strangely Second Annual Report. I don't know why it was the
Okay.
second. I can't remember
Okay.
why it was the second one.
But you wrote about them
Yeah.
and Psychic TV, I think, over the years, didn't you?
Yeah, my friend Alex joined Psychic
Exactly,
TV. Yeah.
exactly. And remained interested and
Yeah, for a
drawn
long
to them.
time.
Yeah.
But I found it kind of shocking when two of his female partners both accused him of violence.
Yeah.
You know, he denied it. But apparently with Cozy Fanny Tutti there was a witness.
Right.
And then I went to the launch of that book, England's Hidden Reverse, which is about him and David Tibet and all those bands. And I, just by coincidence, his wife Paula had just come into the country and heard about this. So I said, oh, hello, Paula. And she was saying, oh, people think Jim's great. You know, he chased me with a knife. And I was like, oh, that's true. Well, they're not saying this.
Right.
I had a lunch with mutual friends with him and Paula and Brighton many years ago, and he was saying things which were absolutely revolting.
Right.
That I won't go into any great detail
sure,
here,
sure.
but I basically kind of walked out. I was absolutely just really.
Peter Christopherson was a bit. I mean, I know he's a great designer at hypnosis, but he's a very, very strange guy. I remember Jen saying to me, "People think I'm weird. You want to see what he gets up to?"
This is a story, a very special story. It's about Brian Jones, the one on the Rolling Stone.
Yeah, so just to sort of bring your individual stories up to kind of the present day, I mean, do you want to tell us kind of what you're up to at the moment? Are you got a new? You just showed us this little
I'm
pamphlet
just
thing
doing
Yeah.
all sorts of things. I'm kind of still writing for the Wire magazine. I'm still drawing. I'm still trying to do a bit of painting. You know what I mean? I'm still sort of
It's
in
still
the,
in
in the
demand,
arts,
for,
really,
that's,
and
that's for sure.
I'm still carrying on, really.
I mean, some years ago, you were painting with another painter.
I was, yeah, Chris Long,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
my
Battle
friend.
of the Eyes was
It was
that?
Battle of the Eyes.
That's an
yeah.
extraordinary process to be making paintings with another person.
Yes. It was kind of interesting, very interesting.
Yeah.
We both decided that we wanted to be abstract artists,
Right.
abstract expressionists. So I had a studio at the time at the top of the road.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd go in there, buy great big pieces of paper, lots of acrylic paint and brushes, and get to it, really.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a learning curve for me, because Chris Long knew everything about painting, and he knew about painting. But I didn't. I never used to paint. I just used to use repeatographs and things
Right.
like that. I had very little use of knowledge of colour or how it all worked together, really. And I did know the basics, but what I learnt through Chris Long was pretty interesting.
Right.
And I think we learnt from each other, and I think I taught him to sort of loosen up a bit and be freer, and
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not be so tight.
Sure.
Just freak out. You know what I mean? I told him to freak out, and he did. So that
In
was
the
good.
spirit of the mothers of invention. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
Then the experiment ended, and
Right.
that was time
That
to
was
call
that.
it a day.
Yeah.
Really, he's returned to being an abstract painter, and I returned to my little table at home and started drawing monsters again.
There's always monsters
Yeah.
lurking in the deep. Sandy, what's keeping you out of trouble these days?
I don't listen to a great deal of new music. I like that band Squid from Brighton. I don't know if you've heard them.
I've heard the name.
They're sort of like, the drummer sings, it's sort of like the Fall, only they have jazz brass bits thrown in. It's very strange, but I really like them. And I like this Strange Addiction. They've got stuff on YouTube. It's basically a duo with a girl singer called Anna Pierce. Really great songs. Somebody should snap up their publishing. Really, really good.
Strange Addiction.
Strange Addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people seem to use that name on YouTube, but you can find them, you know. Great little videos as well.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of doing. I don't have a great interest in Patti Smith these days, but a lot of people seem to like the old fanzine and pay ridiculous, silly amounts for it. So Edwin and I were talking about we might put together a little book of the 8 issues.
A book of white stuff.
Yeah,
That would be
amazingly.
Collect it together and, you know, let it free again.
A white stuff scrapbook, like your Aleister Crowley scrapbook that is sitting right in front of me here, which meant to mention earlier, from 1988. So yeah, I'd love to see a white stuff.
Amazingly,
book.
one of the guys from Rough Trade still had the original paste-ups of the first 4 issues of White Stuff in storage after like 40 years, untouched. And he said, I said, can I have them back? And he went and found them.
That's fantastic.
So you've got those
And I've got some other issues. The only missing issue, someone has sent me a PDF, so it could be done. Yeah, it could easily be done. And I'm doing introductions for various books when I get asked, you know.
When did you first see Patty play?
I came down to London
For 76, Roundhouse.
1970. Was it 75 or 76? Roundhouse.
76.
Yeah, I came down specially
that.
for that. I used to come to London just to see gigs. Came to London to see Poco.
Paddy's been like, I understand. Poker, that's going the distance.
They played one of the worst shows I ever saw in my life, Poco. Rainbow, I think. It was absolutely dreadful.
Yeah.
That's probably it. Yeah, it
I
wasn't
think the
that good.
original Poco, the very first iteration of Poco that we probably played at like the Troubadour in like 69, I think would have been great. Then it just after that. Anyway, Poco doesn't really belong in this conversation.
But this is what I liked about Sandy, you see, when we were at Sounds. He would just introduce me to this music that would be completely out of my, you know, eye level, you know what I mean, or ear level, or whatever it is. And he'd say, like, have you listened to this new Helen Reddy record? And I go, no, why the hell would I want to listen to that? And he'd put it on, and I'd go, right, okay. And next thing I know, I'll be buying an import of it, you know what I mean, and listening to it at home.
I've still got a letter she sent me when I reviewed Ear Candy, and it says, thank you for the review I have waited my whole life for.
Ear Candy.
Capital had a breakfast with all these guys in pinstripe suits saying, will you sign this for my wife, you know? And she said, and I had a lot of hair down to here, and she said, I want him to sit next to me. And she just talked to me the whole lunch and ignored these guys. It was great. Yeah.
We've got an audio interview with Helen, haven't we, on the site, which is great. I mean, she's
actually
wonderful in it.
She comes over really nicely in it.
Yeah, lovely woman.
Apparently she's a real dope-smoking, nice woman. And sadly she passed away. She had dementia.
Yeah, exactly.
Lillian Roxon was a very early promoter of her. It's the Australian roots. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm a star. Hey baby, I'm a star. I dream real big and I took it far.
Shall we you mentioned Hawkwind earlier. And Hawkwind was one of the bands that the great Andrew Lauder signed and worked with at United Artists / Liberty. He's just publishing his new book, Happy Trails. It's the story of his career as an A&R guy, and it's fascinating, really. It's very like listy, but it's a fascinating. You just realise how many extraordinary artists he worked with, including Hawkwind, of course. And so we dug out an audio interview that Mark is going to tell us about.
So Andy Gill, we think it's 1990 because the Stone Roses are just Manchester's just kind of hitting the big time. But it's really interesting. He talks about, as a 17-year-old, going down Denmark Street, knocking on doors, looking for a job in the music business. He decided this was what he wanted to do. And he goes into Southern Music Publishers and says, you know, have you got any work? And the guy says, well, if you sit down over there, you can start working for us straight away, pretty much. I mean, it's unbelievable stuff. And so he works there for a while. Then Liberty opened their UK branch, and he kind of goes over there as A&R. It's his first real A&R job. Liberty / United Artists, the same label. His first signing was the Groundhogs, Tony McPhee's, which I'm very fond of.
Me too. Yeah, with the thumbs up all around the table. Very underrated.
I mean, it's very interesting because he's really into, you know, Hawkwind and Man. He signs. At one point, Chrysalis come looking to employ him. And he goes back to, and they offer him twice the salary. He goes back to United or Liberty / United Artists and says, "Look, they've offered me this gig. Well, listen to this clip." And basically they come back and say, "No, you stay with us and we'll double your salary." And
Well, shall we hear that?
Chrysalis was pretty early on. I think they got 10 years after they looked after her. They were on Decca. Jethro Tull and Rodman Pig, and that was about it. So I said, I accepted the job and told the guys at UA, and he sort of totally freaked out and said, "Right, okay, you're the head of A&R, and we'll give you lots more money, and what colour do you want the office?" So I had this ludicrous office that was like a Wild West salon with bull's horns and swinging doors and totally ridiculous. And a guy from San Francisco reading star signs at the end of the table. And it was smoke extractors, so this kind of marijuana madness that was going. And just did more of that. And we had Brinsley's came along, 17, and Man. And then we had all, Help Yourself and this kind of more and more of the kind of... It was a great UA scene. It was like this little thing. It was nothing to do with it, basically, wasn't it? And it was good fun. And we were selling enough records that Hawkwind was doing, the Groundhogs were doing well, that I sort of got away with it, basically.
Terrific stuff. I mean, he signed Dr. Feelgood. He signed, who actually a very important band in a variety of ways. He also signed Eamon Dool II, the second Eamon Dool, and Can. So has a big responsibility for the promotion of krautrock in this country. I mean, it's interesting because Hawkwind and Man and Eamon Dool and Can, they're sort of jam bands. It's an element of what they do. He likes that sort of sprawling rock. I mean, and the other thing is that he didn't really have any huge hits, but he always did well enough to keep a gig in A&R. So you could call him sort of second division A&R man, but I really like that. But it's really good. Punk rock comes along. He signs the Stranglers and the Buzzcocks. And then he moves over to the sort of the Elvis Costello, Nick Lowe, Radar,
Riviera,
F-Beat, Demon, becoming a catalogue label boss, which is about the CD, the introduction of the CD, and suddenly back catalogue became of value all over again. And he says, they were more or less the first to do it, but within a few years, all the majors were doing it better than they could do it. And then starts Silvertone Records and signs the Stone Roses. Let's have a listen to the next clip.
Basically, we just had this thing in Manchester, and then no one else, knew much what was going on. I think the big companies and Mystics, they'd probably seen them early on when they weren't very good. A lot of people had seen them a year before I did. So it used to be bloody awful, wacky. But then, they've had the time to get to be good. So many groups that get crossed off the old A&R list far too early. They've done 5 gigs. Leave them alone for 6 months. But they've kind of crossed them off the list so that in case they're asked about, what about this Charlatans group? Oh yeah, I saw them 6 months ago. It's crap. Whatever. At least if you've got an answer for something. But it's difficult now. Everything comes out of Manchester. Obviously, everyone's up there running around like a fast fly, trying to worry if they've got the right one.
That'll turn nasty, didn't it? The Stone Roses relationship.
They came and trashed his office because they were angry about what was a pretty iniquitous contract that had actually been drafted before he arrived there by Zomba.
Right.
So Silvertone was a label that Zomba started.
Yeah.
Jive. Yeah, the Zomba group, Clyde Banks. We were talking earlier about Ahmad Jamal, and you were sounding very enthusiastic about Ahmad Jamal in particular.
Ahmad Jamal 2.
Ahmad Jamal 2.
Well, I liked Ahmad Jamal 1 as well, and they were even more of a jam band than anything else, really. About like communal jam band, weren't they? Sort of very odd.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the many people who bought the Live in London album because we always seem to talk about these budget records that were released in that era,
Like
and
the
they were all
fast tapes.
99p. And I've got a Brinsley Schwartz 99p album that Andrew also put out.
Those were great.
Yeah, they were.
And the
great.
samplers. I loved all those samplers.
Yeah,
They were kind of an introduction to music, weren't they? They kind of like they were like primer, to use a quote from the Wire. They were the primer for what music you were going to listen to.
Islands were really good. They put out lots
Yes.
and lots of samplers, and then there's like fill your head with rock and all those sorts of things.
Exactly.
And when you're 13 or 14 or 15 and you've got a tiny amount of pocket money, you can't afford to start buying a lot of records. You just don't. And so the sampler was you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the equivalent now to like having a Spotify account or something.
Yeah. But those records were, like I said, a prime. But every record label had one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Every like even Vertigo had one as well. That was coming out of Philips, wasn't it, or something like that? You know what I mean? All these arcane record labels, but they all had a progressive label and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they were all sort of putting out samplers, just kind of invite you into their. But most of the times, the samplers were better than the actual horrible LPs that the ghastly prog rock bands were putting out.
Yeah.
I got one from the States from A&M. I found out, and I thought they wouldn't send it, but I filled in the form, and it had the original version of It Ain't Easy that David Bowie later covered on it, and it was just all their weird bands. I couldn't believe they sent it to Scotland for nothing.
Fantastic. They all had titles like The Rock Machine
Turns you on. Yes,
Great one.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Vertigo, and I think one of the things that's interesting about Lauder is that United Artists did not, or Liberty, they didn't create a new label for kind of freaky underground music. Andrew just signed all these sort of freaky underground acts like Hawkwind and the Groundhogs.
Liberty just suddenly became this weird label.
Exactly.
It was
Whereas
just
in
odd,
America
wasn't it?
it was associated with sort of Bobby
Just so
V and
strange.
yeah,
because Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band were on the Strictly Personal was on that and everything.
Yes.
And their sampler was Gut Bucket, which was really good. Gut Bucket and Son of Gut Bucket with these fantastic pig pictures on the front of the covers.
Yeah.
Right.
And then sort of like with Silvertone, you got the Stone Roses, but he also signed J.J. Cale, Loudon Wainwright III, John Lee Hooker.
Yes.
It's very odd.
And you were telling us, Edwin, that you actually worked for Silvertone.
And Andrew asked me to write for Silvertone magazine. Well, I think I did one piece, I think, and that was an interview with Loudon Wainwright III. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that went in.
Yeah. I mean, I've almost finished this book, Happy Trails. I think it's High Times and A Charmed Life or something. You read the book and it does feel like he had a sort of charmed life. He came down from Hartlepool in the way that you described and had a job within 24 hours. And everything just seemed to kind of fall into his lap.
His parents wanted to him to go to university and all that. And he said, "No, I just want to go and work in the pop industry."
Yeah.
But I think if you...
It's exactly like me, that your parents think, this is impossible.
Yes.
You don't know anybody.
I know.
You don't... How can you do this?
Yes.
You'll be back in 2 weeks. Married.
Like, my parents couldn't believe that I'm doing what I was doing. They just couldn't believe I was earning a living drawing silly cartoons and writing about music. And they just couldn't... It was beyond their comprehension.
Yeah.
Yes.
They thought, what on earth... There must be something wrong here. There must be something going on.
My mother was born in Toronto, and I think the first time she really believed it was a good job was when I rang her from Toronto and said, "Don't worry about the phone call, I'm not paying for it." She was like, "Oh my God."
Who were you interviewing in Toronto? Can you remember?
Some terrible metal band, I can't remember their name.
Called Paying Your Dues, right? Yeah. We wanted to.
But maybe it is like the occult. The stars were in the right ascendant, or whatever it is, and it was meant to happen. You know what I mean? That we were lucky. We were just sort of there at the right time. And I think Andrew Lauder was there at the right time. He just stepped into the office when he had a job going, and that's all you needed. You just needed a chink to get through, and then you spread out what talent you had in front of them, and they cherry picked it.
In a way, the saddest thing was the professionalisation of the music business in the 70s.
Yeah.
As it became increasingly professional, and suddenly that ability just to walk into Southern Music and Denmark Street and ask for a job,
you'd be thrown out before you got anywhere near reception.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
They gave me 25 quid a week just to sort of tell them about things.
Right. I know.
That's a lot of money then.
I know.
Yes.
That's
Huge
pretty
amount
good.
of money.
Yes. And in a way, Lauder just has managed to kind of sustain his career like that. You know, he never signed an Eagles or a Dire Straits because he wouldn't have been interested in working.
There was some
with
discussion
music.
about who actually signed U2. I've read elsewhere that he was. Then you.
Well, in his book, he doesn't say he signed them, nor, frankly, did he sign the Stone Roses.
I can rather hope he didn't sign
Yeah.
U2 because that's a bottom discussion.
But I thought it was interesting that second clip where he sort of, I thought it was a very pertinent point that, you know, A&R men would go up to Manchester and dismiss a band and never go to see them again.
Yeah.
And
He's also-
people had dismissed the Stone Roses, who became almost like the biggest band in the land.
A&Ring had become a competitive industry where you had to get the band first, and so people would go and see bands after they played 5 gigs or something like that. And they just weren't ready, and so bands would get them. And his thing was that Stone Roses had actually been around for like 2-3 years before they got signed, and so got good. I mean, as I said, this is 1919. He's talking about the changes happening then in the music industry, and you can tell he's not terribly comfortable with them. And his own career as an active A&R guy, he's only got about 3 more years left to run at that point, you know.
Yeah.
He's really talking about the men they couldn't hang,
Right.
who he was convinced are going to be the next big act on the Sylvan.
No, probably not. But mention should also be made about his love of the West Coast music, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and how involved he was with that. And that involved, you know, that produced stuff like Brinsley Schwartz and Nick Lowe and things
Well,
like
Man
that. And
were like...
Help Yourself and things like that.
Yeah, but like
you
a
know.
Welsh Quicksilver Messenger service.
Exactly,
That's how
in
he
fact,
saw...
All dead, I remember people
In
calling
fact, didn't Capolina play
He did.
guitar on the
Exactly.
one of the Man albums?
Yeah, and he's out of tune. Sadly, he was completely out of tune. So that, in fact, I think they've actually mixed him out of the record.
But he was obsessed with San Francisco and any excuse to go to San Francisco. And in the first clip, he talks about his office, which he basically wanted to recreate the original Charlatans, you know, the saloon in Virginia where they played, and that was his idea with the bullhorns and everything, and
the guy doing the tarot.
The guy reading the tarot. Yeah, and all the marijuana smoke. I mean, he just wouldn't be able to operate like that in the music industry anymore, would he? But anyway, fascinating. On that note, I think we just want to pay tribute to a couple of people that we've lost in the last 2 weeks. The first being Jah Shaka, if I can pronounce that correctly. Jah Shaka, the great sound system guy based here in London, probably the most famous reggae sound system operator.
Edwin, this is very much your territory.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess, but... That said, I hardly have any records by Jah Shaka. I don't really... That Jah Shaka's discography is a mystery to me. Absolutely. I wish I could. I wish I could sort of plumb its depths, you know what I mean? But I just don't know where to go to find out about it.
I kind of done the same thing. Actually, when he died, I thought I tried to kind of find stuff, and I think he's slightly... The story of him being a record maker has been slightly overblown. But actually his principal thing was some guy who ran sound systems.
Yes.
And I remember seeing him at like the Carnival a lot and so on and so forth. And, a single turntable, none of this twin turntable sort of stuff. You know, one record player, put the record on, play it to the end.
I feel that during one of the blues dances I attended, probably with Vivian Goldman during my early days, I must have bumped into a Jah Shaka session, you know what I mean? Because the music he made was just heavy as hell, but also very deeply spiritual, and very, very moving in a way. You know, you felt like God. You were actually listening to some kind of unearthly
sort of church
being, almost like being in a church.
I mean, the sound system is a massively important phenomenon, and he contributed a lot to it.
Well, with no sound system, no hip hop.
No.
Essentially, that Cool Herc
the
was basically
original
trying to
Jamaican.
recreate the sound system, but no one wanted to listen to reggae, so he started playing funk instead. And
Yeah. So we have this epic NME piece from 1981 by Vivian with Penny Reel and Paul Bradshaw, which is all about the sound systems and in particular detail about Jah Shaka. So that's well worth a read. We also, just in the last week, lost the jazz pianist Ahmad Jamal, who I can't say I'm that au fait with his back catalogue. I mean, I have a sort of a particular idea of what he was about, but I think maybe Jasper could fill us in a little bit more about him.
Sure. I mean, I'm not over familiar with his oeuvre, as it were, but I found this live review of him playing at the Barbican in 2005, which does give quite a good overview. It's John L. Walters. Like Cream, Ahmad Jamal's trio is an influential outfit, hugely successful in its time, whose place in history can be underestimated. His early music had a wide public as a kind of 1950s chill-out music, yet he also exerted a considerable influence on Miles Davis. Check out Jamal's sublime composition New Rumba on Miles Ahead. And it's a really nice live review after that. You know, it sounds like it was actually a really great gig with Idris Muhammad on drums and James Kamak on bass, creating a dynamic, sometimes hypnotic pulse that allows the leader to be as bombastic or as spacious as he wishes. And actually, in his later stuff, some of the voicings that he uses are very, very interesting, quite widely spaced and quite kind of ethereal, and at the same time, quite funky still. I mean, I do think that just sort of pigeonholing him as a kind of cocktail pianist is probably wrong.
As I did earlier in the office.
But, you know, I don't have the sort of extensive knowledge of his recording career to be able to pass any kind of real judgment. But there's some tracks that I've heard of his where I really like his playing, actually. You know, a kind of mixture of bassy and maybe Art Tatum and, you know, people like that. It's interesting.
Great, thank you very much, Jasper. Is there anyone else we've lost? I don't think anyone we can talk about in any great
Almost
depth.
certainly tonight. The moment this podcast finishes, someone really important will die.
It does seem to happen in some weird occult way.
Thursdays.
April Stevens of Nino Tempo and April Stevens
That's true.
fame died yesterday. And
I was saying, I hope we make it till Thursday.
Yeah.
but I mean, Deep Purple obviously was a huge hit for Atlantic Records in the early '60s, and actually sort of quite sort of sexy record. She had this quite sexy voice.
I was very disappointed I couldn't find a Keith Altham interview with her. That would have been sort of marvellous.
Yes, indeed.
No.
Mark, will you tell us about a few pieces that you've added?
Just a few things. Last week, very early Eagles interview, Judith Sims in Rolling Stone, 1972. And Bernie Leadon, you can see exactly why Bernie Leadon didn't last to the end of that band. He says, "We're all reading books about the Hopis, Hopi Indians. In the Hopi mythology, the eagle is the most sacred animal with the most spiritual meaning. The eagle flies closest to the sun and will carry our message to the Father. It symbolises all higher spirituality and morals." He gestured with an emphatic beer bottle. "High morals, the best that a man can be. I think it's a beautiful symbol. I'd hope the music would soar like that high." He paused a moment. "Glenn likes the name Eagles for different reasons," he said, as if he really disliked mentioning it, but thought he should be fair. "Glenn likes the name because it sounds like a teenage gang."
Absolutely. But I think that was why Glenn Fry wanted the band to be called Eagles, because there had, in his native Michigan, had been a gang called Eagles.
Unless it's Hopi
and then they went out to the desert and saw eagles circling overhead, and it all became this kind of.
I always thought they were called the Eagles. I mean, in a weird way, you know. In my naivety, when I first heard the name, I thought they'd chosen that because it was bigger than the Birds.
There may have been that. They always Donnelly said, "We're called Eagles. We're not called the Eagles. We're just called Eagles." Which is, and actually, if you see the album covers, it all generally say
Warren
Eagles.
Zevon once said, "I hate this when British rock critics like me, but they insult my friends." They're really nice guys.
1978, Wayne Robbins interviewed Sean Cassidy, and Sean Cassidy's the half-brother of David Cassidy. And he comes over as an entirely different beast, where David Cassidy died not that long ago, sort of came unravelled a bit. And Sean is a really sensible, straightforward guy. He's a teen heartthrob, he's in TV. But he says, "This business is very, very shallow. It's fun, but it's not very intellectually stimulating. Your world isn't enlightening. You forget how to spell, and even saying a word as big as something becomes a challenge." You know, but he's very clear-eyed about what he's doing, and he went on to have actually a very happy life and so on and so forth.
Oh,
you know,
unlike David.
Unlike David, yeah. This week, Nancy Sinatra on Lee Hazelwood to Alan Smith and The Enemy in 1967. Lee's been responsible for my entire success on record. I can never forget that, and I never want to. Lee's difficult to get to know. His manner tends to bring out strange things in people. After a few minutes, most of those who meet him either love him or hate him intensely.
Did either of you ever encounter Lee Hazelwood?
No, I remember buying the International Submarine Band for 50 pence on Lee Hazelwood International Records in the Barras in Glasgow, that notorious junk.
Well, many say that is the first country rock album, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think Hazelwood really did not care for Graham Parsons. It felt very threatened by this young buck.
Yeah.
But no, I did interview him once and I absolutely loved him. May have had something to do with the fact he was drinking Chivas Regal at midday.
My kind of guy.
Your kind of guy. I found him very, very amusing, but I know that he could be quite a curmudgeon. Those Sinatra and Hazelwood records are glorious. Some Velvet Morning and pretty quite occultish actually. Some Velvet Morning.
My doctor said to me once, "You ever heard of Lee Hazelwood?" And I was like, "What?" You don't expect your doctor to ask, you know.
So what, you had a discussion about?
Well, she knew I had been in the music business,
Oh, wow.
you know. But
Okay,
and she said,
she was a fan.
and I said, "You've heard of Lee Hazelwood?" And she said, "What, you think I don't know what's what, you know?"
Yeah, I'm hip.
Yeah, I'm hip.
Very funny.
Some velvet morning when I'm straight.
Flowers growing on a hill.
I'm gonna open up your gate.
Lastly, this is Tanya Donnelly, interviewed by Evan McDonald, musician, 1993. And what she's saying kind of resonates today with some of the sort of way people can be criticised. And she says, "I'm a right girl target right now because I wear makeup, because I smile. I'm really tired of justifying myself. First of all, I've been doing this for 10 years and fuck them on that level right away. And second of all, it's really unfair that it's been turned around to where there's a new set of rules." And this, I think we can say, there are echoes of this
In the current era. Jasper, what have you got?
Just one thing I'll mention, actually. Why Heavy D Matters by Michael A. Gonzalez in Complex on 10th of November 2011, which was just after Heavy D died. Though many remember him as the overweight lover, Heavy D was much more than one of hip-hop's first pop stars. He made some of the most important moves behind the scenes. And even after his untimely death, Hev's lasting influence on the game remains undeniable. It's a really interesting exploration of the influence of a kind of, late 80s rapper who paved the way for guys like Biggie, because he was Heavy D, you can gather from the name, was a big guy. Women and girls were swooning over the big guy, something that hadn't happened since the days of Barry White. Heavy is one of the coolest guys in the music business, singer Faith Evans wrote in her memoir, Keep the Faith. He was gregarious and jovial and never failed to make me smile. But then also he was quite influential. Behind the corporate scenes at Uptown, Heavy was instrumental in getting crooner Albie Shaw signed to the label and landing a young Harlem kid named Sean Puff Daddy Coombs an internship at the label. So he's kind of part responsible for doing that, for Mary J. Blige, Soul for Real, Jodeci, So it's an interesting piece to read about someone.
We've been listening to him in the office, and it's marvellously old school.
It's very old school in a very fun way.
Lindrum and him talking over the top and not much else.
But it's fun. It's good fun.
Yeah.
The book of romance. So come on, take a chance. You don't need a long look. All you need is a glance. If you want to get warm, in my arms you belong. You have a problem, have a problem, nothing can go wrong. When overweight lovers in the house, the overweight lovers in the house.
Wonderful. Any parting words from our guests?
Well, rap was kind of interesting, wasn't it, in the 80s? I just sort of think I've just put this little book out through Gosh Comics called Rockers and Rappers, which sort of are the illustrations I did for the albums at that time. And I was kind of interested to see it, looking at back issues, that it was either sort of indie rock or metal or like Guns N' Roses and things like that, or heavy rock. And equally, loads and loads of rap artists like Ice-T, Ice Cube, you know, all those guys.
Yeah.
The gangster
The
stuff.
gangster guys, yeah.
That was really coming to the fore. And it felt like at the time, you know, that rap was the new rock and roll kind of thing. It was taking over.
How many rappers are in...
Quite a lot, about a good half and half,
Yeah.
But look at the illustrations.
MF Doom's whole persona was based on being a comic book villain in many respects.
Sure,
and he's fantastic. He's fantastic visually and audio.
He'd taken over the Doctor Doom persona in a way, out of the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
The Fantastic Four's greatest villain.
Yeah.
So
I love MF Doom. I think he's absolutely
he's brilliant. Yeah,
Titanic
absolutely
figure
brilliant.
in that, and his whole aesthetic, his whole kind of vibe, being this villain, and there's there'll be voiceovers that are kind of as if from a cartoon television show about MF Doom is back. What's going to happen. It's really fun and it's really playful and creative and interesting.
I use music obviously as a tool to sort of draw with. You know what I mean? To this day, really.
Yes.
And at that time, I was listening to a lot of rap, and it was affecting how the stuff came out, especially the gangster stuff. Like some of the most insanely violent images in my anthology, Rated Sav X, came through listening to rap and pushing it out through ink.
I mean, Savage Pencil is kind of, could be a graffiti name.
Could be.
They're not pastel watercolours, are
Don't
they?
steal it, kids.
We must put that on the homepage.
We certainly will.
Yeah.
Sandy, is there anything we didn't say about rock and the occult that you feel should have
I can
said?
give you a spooky story to end on. Is Warren Zevon? I was told he was difficult and nasty, and I found him really nice when I met him. And I don't usually ask for autographs, but I did. He had music paper where you write, stave paper, and I said, "Would you sign it?" And he actually wrote some notes, and it was in the Montcalm Hotel, and it said Montcalm Quartet for Sandy Robertson. So I got it framed. I don't know what the music would have sounded like. He'd get someone to play it. Wow. And I had it framed. And when I read he died, it was sitting on a bookshelf about that height with a soft carpet below. And after I read he died, I glanced over and it wasn't there, and it was on the carpet. And I picked it up, and there was a crack right across the glass, and the music was blank. There was nothing there. You can see some dusty marks like the metal. And I've tried everywhere asking people, do you know how to restore lost? If it was a murder confession, you could restore it. If anybody knows how to restore missing stuff, that'd be great. But it's really, I can think of no reason why it would suddenly disappear.
Gives you shivers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's really peculiar.
Well, for what it's worth, I voted for him to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, having been invited via Amy Linden, I think.
Yeah,
somehow.
we both got invited.
We're now eligible to vote.
For something we despise.
Inductions. Yeah. But I selected my 5 artists, and Warren was one of them. I'm a huge Zevon fan. I know you interviewed him. Yeah. So if he is inducted, we'll do something on Warren Zevon. Anyway, listen, thank you so much for
joining us today. Thank you so much.
Really,
Thanks,
really
guys.
interesting and great fun talking with you. To all listeners, please do visit Rock's back pages where subscribers can read over 50,000 articles and listen to over 800 audio interviews with everyone from Jimi Hendrix to Kate Bush. Check to see if your local library subscribes to RBP, and if not, maybe suggest they take a free trial of the world's largest archive of music journalism. We will be back in 2 weeks with Sylvia Patterson. Till then, bye.
Come to the Sabbath, come to the Sabbath, Satan's there. Come to the Sabbath, come to the Sabbath, Satan's there. Come to the Sabbath, come to the Sabbath.
That concludes episode
666.
Episode 150 of the Rock's Back Pages podcast. Many thanks to special guests Edwin Pouncey and Sandy Robertson. Find their books, including Edwin's Savage Pencil Scratchbook and Sandy's Aleister Crowley Scrapbook, in all good bookshops. The hosts are Barney Hoskins and Mark Pringle, and it was co-hosted and produced by Jasper, Murice and Bowie. The Rock's Back Pages podcast is part of the Pantheon Podcast Network. You can find thousands of articles, as well as hundreds of full-length audio interviews at rocksbackpages.com.
Come to the Sabbath, come to the Sabbath, Satan's there. Come to the Sabbath, come to the Sabbath, Satan's there. Come to the Sabbath, come to the Sabbath, Satan's there. Come to the Sabbath, come to the Sabbath, Satan's there.